Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Ancient Epics, the place where the greatest stories of humanity come back to life. For centuries, a chilling certainty haunted the jungles of the ancient Americas. Cities had vanished without graves, without chronicles, without farewell. Beneath towering ceiba trees and choking vines lay avenues once walked by tens of thousands, pyramids once crowned with fire and prayer, reservoirs once mirroring the stars. Early explorers spoke of stone roads swallowed by leaves and white cities erased by green silence. Yet scholars dismissed these accounts as fevered illusions born of heat and hunger. The jungle, it was believed, could never sustain great civilizations. Its soil was too thin, its rivers too wild, its storms too relentless. And so the forests were declared empty, their history reduced to scattered villages and wandering tribes. But the jungle remembered. Deep within the lowlands of Mesoamerica and the vast Amazon basin, the earth concealed geometry too deliberate for nature alone. Hills concealed stairways. Ridges concealed causeways. Forest floors concealed maps of power and order. When sunlight struck at certain angles, shadows betrayed lines that did not belong to chance. What had been lost was not destroyed, but hidden patiently waiting for eyes willing to see through leaves rather than at them. This is the story of those buried worlds, of cities planned by astronomers, engineers, and priest kings, of stone rising from swamps, of fields engineered to defeat floods, of civilizations that mastered jungle and sky alike. This is the story of long-lost jungle cities uncovered by explorers and of the ancient Americas reclaiming their forgotten grandeur. Long before steel blades and foreign sails reached the western continents, vast civilizations flourished beneath the tropical sun. In the Maya lowlands of present-day Guatemala, Belize, and southern Mexico, dense forests once sheltered a constellation of city-states bound by trade, rivalry, and shared cosmology. These were not primitive settlements scattered at random, but meticulously planned urban landscapes. Cities such as Tikal, Calakmul, Caracal, and El Mirador rose from limestone bedrock. Their pyramids aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and the slow, majestic cycles of Venus. Stone causeways known today as sakbib stretched across miles of jungle, connecting ceremonial centers with astonishing precision. Reservoirs carved into bedrock captured seasonal rains, sustaining populations through droughts that could last years. Agricultural terraces reshaped hillsides, while Bajo's natural wetlands were transformed into fertile fields through canals and raised platforms. The jungle, far from being an obstacle, became an ally shaped by human knowledge and labor. At the heart of these cities stood temples whose stairways climbed toward the heavens. Their orientation was never accidental. At certain dawns, the sun-crowned temple summits in flame, marking sacred days when kings renewed their bond with cosmic order. Above them, the night sky unfolded like a living codex. Constellations were not distant abstractions but active forces, guiding planting seasons, royal accessions, and ritual warfare. The Milky Way itself was seen as a celestial river, mirrored on Earth by winding waterways threading through the forest. Yet even the greatest of these cities were not eternal. Between the 8th and 10th centuries, many Maya centers were abandoned. The causes were complex and intertwined. Prolonged droughts, environmental strain, political fragmentation, and shifting trade networks. Stone monuments ceased to be raised. Palaces fell silent. Forests crept back with relentless patience. Within generations, cities that once echoed with drums and chants were reduced to green mounds indistinguishable from natural hills. When Spanish chroniclers arrived centuries later, the jungle offered few answers. Indigenous memory preserved fragment songs of ancient kings, stories of ancestral cities, but the full scale of what had existed remained hidden. Early European explorers occasionally reported immense ruins swallowed by vegetation, but their claims were often dismissed as exaggerations. The prevailing belief hardened. The Americas, it was said, had never known cities comparable to those of the Old World. Far to the south, in the vast Amazon basin, an even deeper mystery lay concealed. For generations, the Amazon was described as an untouched wilderness, incapable of sustaining complex societies. Its soil, thin and quickly exhausted, seemed to forbid large-scale agriculture. And yet scattered throughout the forest were signs that refused to be ignored. Dark, fertile earth known as terra preta appeared in patches too widespread and uniform to be natural. Straight embankments cut through forest like scars. Perfect circles and squares emerged in deforested areas, their symmetry unmistakably human. These earthworks, some spanning hundreds of meters, revealed landscapes shaped on a monumental scale. Causeways crossed floodplains. Moats and ditches enclosed ceremonial centers. Raised fields elevated crops above seasonal waters, transforming wetlands into productive farmland. Rather than conquering nature through destruction, Amazonian societies engineered balance, enhancing soil fertility and biodiversity. Forests were cultivated, not cleared. Enriched, not erased. Ancient rivers became highways of exchange, carrying ceramics, stone tools, feathers, and stories between distant communities. Settlements formed networks rather than isolated points, bound together by waterways and shared cultural traditions. These were not fleeting experiments, but systems sustained for centuries, perhaps millennia. The jungle's power to erase memory proved formidable. When populations declined through disease, displacement, and upheaval following European contact, the forest reclaimed its domain with astonishing speed. Within decades, roads vanished. Within centuries, cities dissolved into green anonymity. What remained were legends whispered among local peoples and faint patterns glimpsed from the air. In the 20th century, explorers armed with machetes, maps, and patience began to challenge the old assumptions. Archaeologists hacked through vines to reveal carved stelae bearing dates older than Rome. Surveyors traced causeways, running arrows straight through terrain once thought impassable. Yet even these efforts barely scratched the surface. The jungle guarded its secrets fiercely, concealing vast structures beneath canopies impenetrable from the ground. Only with the arrival of new eyes, those that could see without touching, did the full truth begin to emerge. When pulses of light were cast from the sky and measured in their return, the forest's illusion of emptiness shattered. Beneath the leaves lay cities beyond imagining, waiting not to be discovered, but remembered. And as the outlines of these lost worlds slowly reappeared, the ancient Americas began to speak once more, their voices rising softly through stone, soil, and shadow, calling history back from oblivion. As the veil of vegetation was gradually lifted, the jungle revealed that its silence had always been deceptive. From above, patterns emerged with startling clarity. Technologies that measured the earth with light uncovered vast urban plans hidden beneath the canopy, showing that what once seemed wilderness was in truth a carefully organized human landscape. Hills resolved into pyramids, natural ridges straightened into roads, forests dissolved into cities. In the Maya lowlands, airborne surveys revealed that centers like Tikal and Karakal were not isolated ceremonial hubs but cores of enormous metropolitan systems. Dense populations once lived among orchards, reservoirs, and terraced fields. Defensive walls stretched for kilometers, indicating periods of intense rivalry and warfare between rival kingdoms. Causeways linked cities across valleys and swamps, defying assumptions that jungle terrain limited movement or political reach. What emerged was a vision of urban density rivaling that of ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, sustained not by rivers like the Nile or Euphrates, but by sophisticated water management and ecological knowledge. The stones themselves spoke in measured language. Stele carved with hieroglyphs recorded dynasties stretching back centuries, naming kings who traced their legitimacy to mythic ancestors and celestial events. Dates were marked with astonishing precision using the long count calendar, a system capable of tracking time across thousands of years. These inscriptions tied political authority to cosmic order, binding earthly rule to the turning of stars and planets. A king's rise was not merely a political act, but a cosmic alignment. Astronomy shaped every aspect of Maya urban life. Temples were oriented to frame the rising sun on solstice mornings or the extreme positions of Venus, whose cycle governed warfare and sacrifice. Observatories, such as those at Uxmal and Chichen Itza, tracked the heavens through narrow windows and carefully angled walls. The sky was not distant, but intimate, woven into stone and ritual. Each city became a reflection of the cosmos, a terrestrial mirror of divine order. Southward, beyond the familiar boundaries of Mesoamerican civilization, the Amazon basin yielded revelations even more disruptive to old narratives. Where scholars once imagined scattered bands of hunter-gatherers, the land itself told another story. Vast geometric earthworks, circles, and octagons emerged beneath cleared forest. These were not defensive structures alone, but ceremonial spaces, gathering places aligned with cardinal directions and seasonal cycles. The scale of transformation was immense. Raised fields stretched across floodplains, allowing crops to grow above seasonal waters. Fish weirs and canals directed aquatic life into controlled harvests. Forests were selectively managed, favoring useful species such as Brazil nut, cacao, and palm. Over generations, these practices created a human-shaped ecosystem that thrived in balance with nature. The jungle, far from being untouched, was a living archive of human intention. At the heart of this system lay terra preta, the dark earth that defied expectations. Rich in charcoal, organic matter, and nutrients, it transformed poor soils into enduring farmland. Unlike modern fertilizers, its fertility did not fade with time. Even centuries after abandonment, these soils remained productive. Their creation required knowledge passed down through generations, a quiet science embedded in daily life. Each field was a testament to patience and foresight, to civilizations that planned not just for themselves, but for descendants unseen. European arrival shattered these worlds with tragic speed. Diseases carried across oceans swept through populations with devastating force, often racing ahead of explorers themselves. Communities collapsed before they were ever encountered. Trade networks dissolved. Knowledge fractured. Without hands to maintain canals and fields, the jungle surged back, erasing roads and swallowing cities whole. By the time written records began to describe the interior, the transformation was already complete. This erasure shaped centuries of misunderstanding. When explorers ventured inland and found few inhabitants, they assumed none had ever been there. The forest's regrowth was mistaken for primordial wilderness. Indigenous voices, diminished and displaced, struggled to preserve memories against the weight of conquest and neglect. The ancient cities became rumors, half-believed and easily dismissed. Yet the land never forgot. Every raised causeway beneath vines, every straight canal beneath roots, every pyramid disguised as a hill remained precisely where it had always been. When light-based mapping finally pierced the canopy, it did not reveal isolated ruins, but entire civilizations stitched into the earth. In Guatemala, surveys showed tens of thousands of previously unknown structures surrounding known Maya sites. In Bolivia and Brazil, vast networks of settlements suggested populations once numbering in the millions. These discoveries demanded a reckoning. The ancient Americas could no longer be portrayed as sparsely populated or technologically limited. They were landscapes of innovation, resilience, and intellectual depth. Their engineers solved problems unique to tropical environments. Their astronomers mapped cycles invisible to the naked eye without instruments of metal or glass. Their architects raised monuments that aligned with heaven while anchored firmly in earth. And yet, for all their mastery, these civilizations were not invincible. Climate shifts strained water systems. Political competition escalated into prolonged conflict. Ecological balance, carefully maintained for centuries, sometimes tipped under pressure. Collapse was not sudden annihilation, but gradual transformation, a slow unraveling mirrored in abandoned plazas and unfinished monuments. Still, collapse did not mean disappearance. Descendants endured, carrying fragments of ancient knowledge in language, agriculture, and ritual. Many modern indigenous communities remain rooted in practices shaped by these long-lost cities. Maize cultivation, forest gardening, and celestial lore persist as living echoes of ancient systems. The past survives not only in stone, but in continuity. As explorers and scholars piece together this hidden history, the jungle ceased to be merely a backdrop. It became a participant, both concealer and preserver. Its growth erased traces of violence and abandonment, yet shielded fragile structures from erosion and looting. In silence, it guarded memory until the moment of return. Thus, the long-lost jungle cities stand today not as curiosities, but as reminders. They challenge assumptions of progress and primitivism. They reveal that complexity can flourish without iron, without wheels, without written books bound in leather. They show that humanity has many paths to greatness, some written in stone, others in soil and stars. And as the contours of these buried worlds come into clearer focus, the ancient Americas emerge not from myth, but from truth vast, intricate, and deserving of remembrance beneath the eternal green canopy. In the quiet aftermath of revelation, the meaning of these uncovered cities deepened beyond maps and measurements. Stone outlines and soil patterns formed only the outer shell of a far greater legacy. Within them lay a philosophy of existence shaped by rhythm, restraint, and reverence for cycles larger than any single lifetime. The ancient societies of the jungle understood that permanence was not achieved by resisting nature, but by listening to it. Across the Maya world, city planning reflected an awareness of time as a living force. Monuments were raised not merely to honor rulers, but to anchor memory itself. Each carved date fixed a moment within an endless cosmic flow. Even abandonment followed this logic. Cities were not always destroyed in fury. Some were ritually closed, their final monuments erected with care, as if acknowledging the completion of a destined cycle. Stones were left to weather, plazas to grow quiet, and forests to return as rightful heirs. In the Amazon, impermanence was embraced even more subtly. Many ceremonial centers were built from earth rather than stone, designed to endure generations but not eternity. Their builders understood that landscapes shift and rivers wander. By shaping soil instead of defying it, these societies allowed their works to dissolve gently back into the land. Memory was preserved not through monuments alone, but through cultivated forests and rich soils and pathways of tradition passed from elders to children. Explorers who first glimpsed these traces often struggled to reconcile them with inherited assumptions. Yet as evidence accumulated, a new vision emerged, one in which the jungle was neither enemy nor emptiness, but collaborator. Civilization here did not rise in opposition to wilderness, but within it. The boundary between city and forest was fluid, marked not by walls but by gradients of use and meaning. Astronomy remained a unifying thread. From the Yucatan to the southern Amazon, the sky offered order where the earth appeared unpredictable. The movements of the sun regulated agriculture. The moon guided rituals tied to water and fertility. Venus, radiant and restless, symbolized both renewal and danger. Even distant constellations shaped mythic geographies, mapping stories onto stars so they could never be entirely erased. These celestial patterns offered continuity amid uncertainty. When drought struck or floods reshaped riverbanks, the heavens remained constant. By aligning their cities with the sky, ancient builders anchored human life within a stable cosmic framework. This alignment offered meaning beyond survival, transforming hardship into part of a larger, intelligible design. The rediscovery of these cities also reshaped the modern understanding of collapse. Decline was no longer seen as simple failure, but as transformation. Some centers faded as others rose. Population shifted rather than vanished. Knowledge adapted, migrated, and endured in altered forms. The jungle's silence concealed motion, not absence. Modern descendants of these ancient societies continue to navigate landscapes shaped by ancestral hands. Terraced hills still guide rainwater. Forests enriched long ago still bear fruit. Place names echo forgotten cities. Oral traditions preserve echoes of origins tied to stars and sacred directions. The past remains present, woven quietly into daily life. The explorers who brought these cities back into awareness did not truly uncover them. They listened. They allowed the land to speak through patterns revealed by light and patience. Each discovery reminded the world that history does not vanish when it is ignored. It waits, layered beneath assumptions, until understanding is ready to receive it. Today, the long-lost jungle cities stand as teachers. They speak of balance rather than dominance, of knowledge shared across generations rather than hoarded. They caution against forgetting the limits of any environment, no matter how abundant it appears. And they affirm that complexity and wisdom have flourished in many forms, far from the centers once deemed exclusive bearers of civilization. As the canopy continues to breathe and grow, these cities remain partially hidden, preserving mystery alongside truth. Perhaps that is their final lesson. Not all knowledge demands exposure. Some truths gain strength by enduring quietly, shaping the world from beneath leaves and soil. In the soft glow of rediscovery, the ancient Americas reclaim their voice not as legends inflated by wonder, but as histories deepened by respect. Stone and earth, sky and forest together tell a story of humanity's capacity to adapt, imagine, endure. And within that story, the jungle stands not as a tomb, but as a living archive, holding memory in green embrace until the moment it is once again called forth. If these ancient voices touched your heart today, please consider subscribing to Ancient Epics and ringing the bell so you never miss the next forgotten tale. Thanks for watching.